This is a disposable mask. More specifically, this is an N95 filtration mask, as it blocks 95% of particles and bacteria. It is the preferred mask for healthcare workers in situations where risk of transmission is high. Not to be confused with a surgical mask, which is made of the same material and components, but just not as effective. Both of these mask types are classified as non-woven disposables. Roughly half of the world's face mask and non-woven disposables are manufactured in China, in many cases for US companies including manufacturing giants such as 3M and Honeywell. In 2017, the global non-woven disposable market was valued at almost $8 billion and expected to see steady growth. This is primarily driven by the comparative advantages of non-woven products over traditionally woven textiles in regards to bacterial filtration and prevention of cross-contamination. Robot-assisted surgeries would bring growth to the overall medical disposables market. However, this may impact negatively on demand for N95 masks, as robots have no need for masks. Due to their single-use effectiveness, environmental concerns over disposable products was expected to slightly hinder growth of the market. These factors have resulted in a steady increase in supply and demand and relatively stabilized prices up until 2019. Then, coronavirus happened. As the coronavirus made its way across oceans and borders, the demand for N95 masks across the world skyrocketed. In areas of the United States, the demand rose 17 times higher than usual, while in Australia, prices for an N95 respirator sold for $2.50 in January and $38.50 just 4 weeks later. That's a 1,500% increase. In a matter of weeks, face masks became the most demanded commodity in the world. But how did it get to this? There are many factors that led to this skyrocketing demand for the N95. The biggest factor arguably being the number of buyers. Basically, the whole world. All at once. Governments have reserves called national medical stockpiles, just in case of worst case scenarios, but most of them, including Australia, were dramatically unprepared for coronavirus. Combining this government demand with the private sector, worldwide, all at once, what you get is a lot of buyers. Apart from vaccines, which take a long time to develop, effective substitutes for the N95 mask in highly infectious medical settings are relatively non-existent, concluding that the market for N95 masks is largely inelastic during a health crisis. During the rush to meet demand, there were many factors that restricted more masks from being supplied to the market. N95 masks are comprised of ear loops made from nylon elastic, a small flexible metal strip for the nose, and 4 crucial layers of melt-blown polypropylene. Factories that usually produce phones, cars, and shoes were repurposed to manufacture face masks. However, the outlay of $5 million and up to a 6-month wait for a melt-blown fabric machine to be constructed restricted the producer's abilities to meet the demand. This caused the price of melt-blown fabric to jump to 10 times its usual price. This fabric is also used in the production of other disposable medical supplies, such as gowns and the surgical masks that are used within the community. These additional products were also in high demand, further constricting the amount of resources allocated to producing N95 masks. The Australian Border Force introduced a free rate of customs duty on medical supplies up until mid-2020, easing some of the supply restrictions on domestic markets. However, the restrictions associated with manufacture of melt-blown material greatly restricted the supply of N95 masks. Combining these production delays with the overwhelming demands, the N95 mask's exorbitant prices are understood. An understanding of these events is crucial in developing a forecast for the next 10 years. The supply of N95 masks has increased in the last 12 months, but it remains constrained. Many nations are successfully vaccinating, aiming to reduce the spread of infection, and therefore demand for N95 masks will greatly decrease. However, a return to pre-coronavirus market demand is not likely in the near future. Many governments were unprepared during the coronavirus, and their national stockpiles were dramatically understocked. We could expect governments to take preemptive measures against similar global events and restock their national stockpiles well beyond their previous capacities, as they proved greatly inadequate in 2020. Global efforts towards the Sustainable Development Goals can have both positive and negative impacts on the demand for N95 masks. Focus on reducing inequalities will see the provision of effective medical supplies to developing nations, while efforts to encourage more responsible consumption and production will demand producers to find more environmentally friendly alternatives to disposable medical supplies. Currently, efforts to decontaminate and reuse N95 masks have been mostly ineffective, and a lack of research into viable, environmentally friendly alternatives will sustain the demand for N95 masks into the near future. However, as technology progresses, we can assume the inevitable introduction of more sustainable options. Overall, the demand for N95 masks will decline greatly from current levels, but the preventative measures of government and the lack of alternatives will relieve some of this reduction until more eco-friendly masks are developed. The supply of N95 masks is expected to reduce as the world demand decreases, and particularly, factories that are remodeled to produce masks will no longer realise the financial advantages of producing masks and be forced to return to their normal business operations. A longer-term impact on the supply of N95 masks is the introduction of fully automated production lines that have already been deployed in some European countries in 2020. Widespread adoption of these production lines will lower costs for suppliers and increase the amount supplied. Initially, the supply of N95 masks will reduce in the near future as the effects of the pandemic subside. However, the adoption of automation will lower costs and encourage more suppliers to enter the market. Currently, trade tensions between China and some nations, including Australia, are in a state of uncertainty. If the current trade war extends into the disposable medical supply market, Australia may be deprived of much needed medical supplies. However, this is currently an unmeasurable factor as the probability of its occurrence is largely unknown. Combining the supply and demand curves, we can forecast that the prices will certainly drop in the near future. But new markets in developing nations and a lack of alternatives will support the demand over the next 10 years, while technological advancements will help lower costs, leading to a lower equilibrium.